top story there. And you're going to hear some really good practical advice that they're giving out to indie game designers. Now, it can be very, very tough to get into video games independently. And so what these guys have to say is definitely very relevant. And for people like this, a network of tools and resources that spans province-wide that's going to put them in touch with other developers and also in touch with larger game studios and some of the resources that they have at their disposal is going to be absolutely invaluable. So I'm very proud of what Data's been able to do in conjunction with their partners, one of the major partners being Algoma University out of Sault Ste. Marie, and they're going to be playing a big, big part in setting up that network and providing that to their students as well. So not only are the indie game developers and the major game developers, but now the students as well are going to have access to a lot more resources. Fantastic stuff. Many thanks to Sean Pucknell and Catherine Webb, who did a lot of work on making that happen. And then the last story, I have actually posted up on Megatag. If you're a member of Megatag, then you're going to be able to see that. And it has to do, I put a link to a post by Grant Skinner, where he talks about his thoughts on the future of Flash. This is a very worthy article, worth checking out. It's gskinner.com, and you just go to his blog. And Grant's a guy who has been working in Flash and various other areas of development for quite a while. I always find that his opinions are very well considered and very well balanced, and I pretty much agreed with everything that he had to say on the site. Now, I'm working on a much more in-depth article that has basically been spurred due to the release of the iPad. Now, the iPad is an interesting device, and a lot of people are talking about it. Very notable for the fact that it will not show Flash. But what a lot of people don't really mention is that it's not just Flash that it doesn't show. It really doesn't show any kind of plug-in or runtime. You can't have the Real Player on there. You can't have any kind of Microsoft object on there as well. Not even a Java applet. So this is very, very interesting because this device is really not aimed at, the mobile market. This isn't out there to replace the iPod. It's a bigger screen. It has more processing power. And it definitely could run those plugins, but Apple has chosen to not allow those plugins. Now that's a very interesting decision that they have made. As a developer, if you are working on developing things for Apple, you work in a very constrained environment, like from the beginning right through to the end. Take, for instance, if you want to make something for the iPod. Well, first of all, Apple is going to insist that you use their code editor. Now, for a lot of developers, they're not going to be that comfortable with it. Now, it is a good code editor, not slamming it. It's very, very excellent, but not being able to choose the tools that you work with, it feels a little bit restrictive. But once you've accepted that, in order to make something for the iPod, you have to register and become part of their developer program. Now, you may very well already be a registered developer with any number of, development certificates and authorities, but that's not good enough for Apple. If you're developing something for the Apple, you have to be registered with them and pay fees with them. Okay, it's not a huge fee, so, it's not a big hit to do that, but again, it's another thing that you don't really have a choice on. Now, if you do that and you go ahead and you develop something, Apple's going to control the distribution of that thing through the App Store. You have to put up your program, your application through their store. It has to go through their testing process And, you know, Apple's starting to become known for being a little bit obscure on what those requirements are. It's mystifying sometimes what they reject from the Apple Store. So you really do kind of take your chances when you go to put something up on that store. If it does get approved so that people can download and install it from the App Store, they're going to control the way that you can advertise that app. All of the images that you're going to put up on the App Store and so forth, those have to be approved as well. So now they are really, you know, dictating to you what you're going to build it in, whether you're going to be allowed to apply, whether they're going to allow it to be distributed, and how you're going to advertise it. They would restrict plugins and runtimes on the iPod because it physically, you know, maybe couldn't handle rendering those things very well. But not so for the iPad. The technical consideration is not really that strong of an argument. Now, granted, it's hard to test because to test it, you'd need to install an app, and that would have to go through the App Store. So I haven't seen a whole lot of people running performance tests on the iPad yet. You begin to see where this is a little bit of a problem. Now, for the longest time, Apple has been known as kind of the champion of open standards and so forth. And so people would say, well, you know, runtimes and plugins, they don't really support open standards, and so Apple's not comfortable with them. But at this point, you start to wonder, is it really about open standards? For instance, let's take the argument of Flash, and people say that, well, you know, anything that Flash can do, you're going to be able to do with an open standard using HTML5. I see that all over the place. HTML5 can do anything that Flash can do. Well, first of all, most of the times I see people say that, they don't actually put any examples of HTML5 doing what Flash can do, and I kind of suspect that they haven't done much development in HTML5. Usually when they talk about replacing Flash, what they're actually talking about is the canvas element that is included in some versions of HTML5. You see, the problem is that HTML5 has not been written. It hasn't been fully accepted by the W3C consortium that is the official governing body that determines, you know, what goes into HTML languages. It takes the W3C a long, long time to agree on what should go into a language and what shouldn't. The technology and people's use of the technology greatly outpaces the speed at which the W3C can keep up. And so in some cases, companies have sort of raced ahead of the standards and created something of their own. And I have to say, Apple actually did that in 2004, 2005. They introduced a new tag into HTML. They introduced the Canvas tag, a proprietary piece of code. They actually patented that piece of code. Now, originally, the Canvas tag was only used in their operating system, which of course is totally proprietary, so cool, no problem. The problem comes about in that they introduced the Canvas tag into their browser, into their version of WebKit that runs in Safari, the browser that's on the iPhone. Now, the good thing is that it gives more capability to that browser, and it's very well written and so forth, but you know, the problem is that it's not an accepted standard yet. And so there's nothing stopping, you know, Microsoft, for instance, from saying, okay, no Canvas tag inside of Explorer. Keep it for whatever version of Safari, but we don't have to put it in Explorer because it hasn't actually been ratified by the W3C. And that's exactly what happened. So when companies